podcast that you're listening to is being presented to you with the cooperation of the SJ Network. If you're a person who needs a publicist and you want to appear on podcasts, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. Let's get on with the show.
Today, you are going to hear an interview with the most charismatic man in entertainment.
It's Percy Brown, the actor who hosts the Prince of Fresh Air podcast. It's certainly not the Sherpa.
I'm sure you realize that the last part didn't shock anyone.
Attention, rebels of the Sherpolution. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. We would like to give you a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial simply by heading to www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. There are over 180,000 titles of audiobooks and podcasts, including this one, to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And now, the one and only Mr. Bruce will lead you into the Sherpa Chalet. As a reminder, since the Sherpa is a man of questionable taste, many of the foods sold in our cafeteria will be also.
Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, rebels of the Sherpolution. This is Jim, the podcast Sherpa, and you are listening to Too Many Podcasts. It is the podcast about podcasts and so much more. And my guest is a little bit of both, I guess. It's a podcaster and so much more. We got to get to know him. He calls himself the most charismatic man in entertainment, which is kind of weird because he's being interviewed by the least charismatic man in entertainment. What were the odds of that happening? I don't know. His name is Percy Brown. He is an actor originally from NYC, now living on the left coast, as they call it, working on some stuff. And man, I think he's going to bring back big hair. We're going to talk about his hair and about his career as well. And stick around after that interview because we've got a podcast potpourri without the smell. It's a whole mess of podcasts I've been sampling for Sherpa Samples that are right off the podcast charts. Something for everybody in there, I hope so. But have a listen first to my interview with Mr. No Days Off, Mr. Percy Brown of the Prince of Fresh Air podcast. Hello there, rebels. My guest today has been entertaining since he was 14 years old, and he calls himself the most charismatic man in entertainment. He's got a podcast, and it's called The Prince. He's got a podcast, and it's called The Prince of Fresh Air, and he's coming to us from the other coast of Podcastia, and his name is Mr. No Days Off, Percy Brown. Percy, welcome to the show.
Perfect introduction. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
See, I was kind of shocked when I saw you on camera. We're doing this on Zoom, folks, and your photographs usually have you with really huge hair.
Oh, yeah. So the story behind that. So like I was mentioned to you off camera, I literally was in New York for the film I was doing. I had my hair out. I usually have my hair out. That's my signature look. But Tuesday, when I got the call back for the commercial thing, I braided my hair just because, the girlfriend wanted to see me in it, and I just wanted a break from having to mess with it too much. And so I'm actually going to be taking it out in a couple of days. So I'll be back to my wild hair.
Now, how do you keep that kind of hairstyle?
It's actually not as much work as people think. It's for me, I have my routine. I have all my shampoo stuff in one area. I have all my hair care products. So I don't really do too much. I just, when I'm out, I take it out. When I'm home, I keep it tied up. And I just do it that way.
It's almost like it's a hairstyle that kind of deserves its own name,
It's called the most charismatic hairstyle of all time.
There you go. I like it. We got to come up with some really nice little acronym for it or something like that.
Absolutely.
So you got started in performing and acting when you were 14. You went to a school for this.
Yes, I started. So born and raised in New York City. lived there all my life. Only been out in LA for 2 years, but I started acting ninth grade. I went to Urban Assembly School for Performing Arts up in Upper West Side of Manhattan. And I got to work with Epic Theater Ensemble. If you're not familiar with it, it's a non-for-profit organization, theater organization. Okay. And they bring in Broadway stars, kind of famous actors or just working actors, and they bring them into certain high schools who do performing arts, and they teach you about script reading, acting, scene dialogue, and monologue training. So they teach you a lot about acting and what it takes to go through a script and perform. And so I started with them, and we did a lot of Shakespeare plays. They did a lot of Shakespeare with my school. So I was theater trained. I was a theater major throughout those 4 years. And I got to do about 5 Shakespeare plays with them, off Broadway, some in school, but most of the time it was at a public venue in Lower Manhattan somewhere so people could buy tickets. And it was a really cool experience. I got to meet a lot of, people working in the industry. I got to meet people since it was off Broadway, I got to meet some directors, casting directors. And I also did some training at New York Film Academy while I was in high school too. So part of my school was you can apply for a grant or a scholarship to train at another school for the summer. So I did that. So I ended up doing that to do more theater, to do more film and TV work. And then after I graduated from Urban Assembly, I went to St. Bonaventure University upstate, did another 4 years of acting. But this time around, I did mostly stage, and I also started transitioning TV and film, because that's where the real money is. Let's just cut it and be honest, where, unless you're doing Broadway, TV and film is where the money is. So I did that for 4 years. I competed at a national festival that you had to qualify for. And I ended up winning a role after doing Henry VI. I got nominated for that. And then after graduating in 2018, I've just been acting since. I have an agent now. I do other things outside of acting now, but it's been a long journey of success, downhill falls, tears, and everything. But it's been a road that I wouldn't trade for anything else.
Right. And you've done some indie movies like The Incoherence and Accept the Call.
Yeah. So while I was in college, that's when I mentioned I started branching out into TV and film. Mm-hmm. So what I ended up doing was during my summer breaks, after doing theater for so many years, I wanted to really try my hand at TV and film. And so part of the process for me was during the summers, I had a private acting coach in the city. So, it was easy for me, not having to pay rent, staying with friends and family. I had a lot of time on my hands during the summer. So I did the private training, private coaching for TV and film. I was trying to learn that aspect of acting. And then my first role actually wasn't The Incoherence. It was a small scale project that never really went anywhere. That was my first acting role in TV and film. And it was short. I was a bartender. The Incoherence ended up coming towards the later end before my sophomore year of college. And that was like my first time actually getting a speaking role, being a big part of the cast, getting an IMDb credit, which is very important as an actor for us. And ever since The Incoherence, I've been doing a lot of student films just to keep the time going, but mostly feature films. Accept the Call was one of my biggest ones up to this point. And, it's been a very interesting world. I had to really learn the different acting styles, and it's definitely not as easy as I thought it would be.
Definitely always a challenge. And you actually broke the big news to me that you got a role in an upcoming movie for the streaming services.
Acting has been in my blood. It's something everybody who knows me knows. I'm an actor first. Whether you see me on YouTube, I'll talk about that shortly. From the videos I do or whatever the case may be, acting's always been my priority. So over the last 2 years, when I came to LA, the pandemic happened, and my first step moving here, I got the agent, I got everything. I wanted to start going out for movies and stuff like that. And it's a different process when you get to at this level where I'm at. It takes a little more experience, having the right, tools and stuff. So what I started to do was I went back to the old roots, doing smaller projects just to keep myself busy, keeping my tools sharp. And it just got to the point where, nothing was working. I'll be honest, it's the journey of an actor. I was getting a lot of auditions and nothing was working. I always felt like, is this the moment my agent's going to drop me? Is this the moment where, maybe I have to, reevaluate my career path? Maybe I should just go for reality TV and get my name out there even more and then get back into acting. So I had to really find out what I really want. And so all the stars aligned. So this project ended up happening. The casting started in December. The Incoherence, one of the lead actresses, she actually texted me, and she was like, I have a director friend who's casting for this new upcoming feature film that they want to, really take out there and really want to start get casted and working on the script and stuff. And I think you'd be a really good fit. So she gave me in contact with the director about it, and casting went a couple months. And what ended up happening, which was pretty cool, I auditioned for the lead character. Now, as you said, I have crazy hair, so I get typecast a lot. I'm not going off corporate lawyers, it's not exactly what my branding is for. So the director ended up writing a part for me in the movie. So that came pretty cool. So he ended up just making a whole character for myself. And so we started filming mid-April. So I've been in New York City for 2 months. Filming, I only filmed for about 2 weeks, including script rehearsals and rehearsals on set and stuff like that. And it was probably my biggest film up to this point. It was, I had the whole wardrobe, the whole makeup team. I had the, everything from the sound. It was one of the most professional things I got to do. And it was a really cool experience just to get back into the groove of acting. And it became so easy for me to really immerse myself into the character. And I just love acting. I don't really care about how small the project is or how big it is. I just want to be on camera. I want to be a big part of a film or, a show. And this really came, just because of hard work and my confidence in myself.
You started doing Shakespearean plays. Now, continuing, you've got to memorize that kind of Middle English dialogue, and then, then you're doing regular movies after that. That must have really been like definitely a load coming off your shoulders, saying like, oh, yes, this is something I might say, not "would thou if like a martini."
Absolutely. It's, a lot of people always ask me how easy it is to memorize lines. And I always say the more you do it, the better you get. And so for, like I said, there was a brief 2 years where nothing was panning out for me. So what I started doing was I've learned to appreciate every part of the casting process. So even for me, a lot of times people don't memorize sides or lines for commercials. Some people do. They try to, be professional. What I started doing was during my downtime, I started watching a lot of footage and dissecting the acting. So I would rewatch movies, get the enjoyment first, and then I'll watch how they act on camera, the little subtle movements, see how they do things. And then I started to actually memorize lines for auditions and stuff as best as I could. So I kept my memory sharp. So it's definitely different with TV, with movies and theater. Memorization is completely different. With theater, you usually get a couple weeks to get off book and memorize your lines, and you get a lot of ample time of rehearsals. You have that benefit of having that time to kind of memorize it, but you also have a time frame to actually memorize it. So you can't, wait until the week before the show goes up to be off book. You have to be off book, well before then. Now with TV and film, I can speak mostly to film because I haven't done TV too much yet. With film, you usually get the scenes usually a couple days or the night before. So then what I normally do is, depending on how big my part is, I'll try to just memorize the lines with no motion. Don't put my character to it yet. I'll just try to memorize it. And usually this script changes the night before or the day of when you're on set. So I leave myself open to being able to, all right, if the director comes up to me and say, hey, there's a line change in this scene. So we're going to have you, instead of saying this line, we're going to change it to this line. So you always have to be constantly prepared in TV and film for the script changes. So whereas theater is usually more cut and a lot more lines, you get that. But film is more so you try to know what you're saying for the most part and be open and ready for when the script changes. You have a new line, you have a variation of a line coming out, usually the day of set. So it's different technique. That's why I said it took me a long time to get the difference, because it's completely two different mediums of acting.
When you were growing up and you were getting into this, were there any actors that you admired more than most?
I wouldn't say I admired any actors, but what got me into acting, at my age, Disney Channel was pretty popular. So Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Hannah Montana, Corey in the House, That's So Raven. Those shows were, essential for me when I was in middle school and high school. Those are the shows I grew up on. So, that was the way how I got into acting. And so I always, at that age, Dylan and Nicole Sprouse, the leads of Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, other actors from the shows I mentioned, I definitely used them as inspiration. Tobey Maguire, I definitely got to give him credit. He's always been one of the guys I always appreciated. Spider-Man movies, everything, Seabiscuit, all that good stuff. He's one of my favorites too. So I don't really look up to anyone at this point in terms of acting, but I do have some that I'm like, man, if I could work with him, I would definitely like to. People like Will Smith, Denzel Washington, Chris Hemsworth, a couple other names in there. So, my career path now, instead of Disney Channel, so I'm trying to be be in the Marvel or DC universe. I have the look, I have the charisma, I have the look. I just got to be a villain. I have to.
Are you listening, Marvel people?
Cast me.
Percy is putting it out there, folks. We gotta get this out into the universe. And you're a big guy too. You're like 6'3".
I'm 6'4". Right now I'm about 280-ish, but what's good for me is because of my height and the way I work out, I don't carry myself heavy. So right now, since I was in New York filming, enjoying my time, I'm dining down and getting myself back into tip-top shape that I want. So yeah, I'm a big guy. So it's funny. The director of the last feature film I just did, when he saw me in person, he was completely flabbergasted. He was like, wait, you this big? Like, because a lot of times we were doing Zoom or phone call because he's in New York, I was in LA. And so when he actually saw me, he's like, wow, you a big guy. And I was like, yeah, I don't think Zoom actually gets my full height. So, that's probably why.
Now, how much bigger are you with the hair out?
Oh, man. I'm like 7 feet tall with my hair out.
I think you got a weapon there, Percy,
I tell people because, some people get it, some people don't. And a lot of times some people be like, yo, man, why don't you cut your hair? It's super long. And I tell them all the time, it's all about marketing. In this business and, with my podcast, and I'll talk about Jubilee at some point, it's all about branding. You have to know what you're bringing to the table. When you go to these casting offices, when you're appearing in media stuff, or when you're putting your face out there, you have to market yourself. My podcast, me, my acting, is all tied to a brand, which is why, Percy, I go by Percy. I don't tell people my real name. Is why I call myself the most charismatic man in entertainment. It's part of the brand that I bring to the table. And I think a lot of people, actors or people in media in general, or entertainment, I should say rather, they forget to understand, what is your brand? what is your marketability? What are you looking for? What are you trying to get people to see? So I'm not advertising the Superman. I'm trying to be the hero that saves the little kids. Not saying I wouldn't, but my brand is the guy that, will come into the scene, steal your girlfriend, or I'm the guy who's going to give the hero some trouble. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. That's my brand, the most charismatic man in entertainment, and that's what I'm sticking with.
So the podcast is really just an extension of that, and that's why you started podcasting.
Yeah, so I started podcasting. It all started with the pandemic. I'm sure for a lot of people. It was when I first moved to LA, it was, I got the agent and everything, but I started getting into the groove of just going to work, waiting for the next audition, going to work, waiting for the next audition. And I started losing a purpose. I started losing my identity. So during the pandemic, when I had a lot of time on my hands, I said, you know what, I had to make something for myself. And it started with Jubilee Media. For people who don't know who they are, they're a big YouTube channel out here. And they're big on social media as well, but they've really focused on YouTube, 8 million subscribers and millions on Facebook and Instagram. And I started working with them early of 2020. And when the pandemic hit, I was thinking about my experience on that show, or YouTube series rather. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should do something for myself. Instead of just waiting for the next audition, wait for the next opportunity, I could just make my own stuff. Mm-hmm. So I decided podcast because I have a good voice. I have great personality. Very charming and charismatic, obviously. So obviously.
And you have the experiences to draw on as well.
Exactly. So I had I have many years of being in front of people, performance and talking in front of people. So it was second nature. And people always told me, give it a try. You never know until you try it. So I literally one day, I think it was May when everybody was stuck at home, I just literally picked up the one little mic that I had. Me and my buddy hopped on Anchor, which I host my podcast on, and we recorded my first episode that way. And so it wasn't, spectacular quality, but it was just the fact that I finally got it started. And so now it's became something that, like they always say in show business, you never know what's going to happen. You never know until you try, until you put your stuff out there. And my podcast has grown to the point where if I didn't start it, who knows where I'd be, So I think it's given me a purpose in life outside of acting too. So not only when I get to act, I'm acting, but when I'm not acting, I have something that's mine, that's not tied to the next opportunity. I can do it on my own time. I can edit my own stuff. I have my own content creating ability. So, now at this point in my life, being a young guy in my 20s, I have more options to make money, to get more exposure, to keep myself busy. And there's no better thing to do than podcasts, especially the kind of podcast I do. It's not the traditional, sports or anything. We talk about a lot of controversial topics. We talk about acting in some aspects, but I usually try to keep it in a way where it's informal, it's very entertaining, but people can also learn from it. So that's exactly what I'm looking to do.
Do you usually have a lot of guests on your show, or like here and there?
So when I first started, I was I signed up to a couple different websites where people can reach out to you if they want to join your podcast, mm-hmm. and stuff like that. So I started doing that. And then it got to a point where when my podcast started growing, it became, people are wasting my time. They keep flaking. They keep pushing back. They're not responding to emails. And so once I got to the point where I don't need to beg anybody to do it anymore, I normally now I kind of sort of selected. So, I'll have Netflix actors who've been on Netflix, had their own shows, influencers, regular 9-to-5ers, people I know who's going to have a story to tell, who's going to be very engaging, because that's very important, and have something that somebody can learn from. So now I'm at the point where Outside of being at home filming for two months, I normally try to put out 2 to 3 episodes a month. And so I'm very selective on the kind of guests I bring because I value my time. And, I'm sure people who enjoy listening, don't want to keep going, a month on end, like, when's the next episode? So now I try to be a little more selective about the people I bring on.
Having done all this, I mean, you really concentrated on, presenting this brand of Percy Brown, like you said, you've got very specific ideas of what you want to do in film and in podcasting. Do you think that there's anything else that you need to do to kind of blow it up?
So mentioning Jubilee, that's how I started realizing one thing I realized, especially in this era, it's not about talent anymore. It's about people knowing who you are and being popular. People have to know who you are nowadays. And like I always say, for instance, Tom Holland, right? He ended up even just auditioning for Spider-Man because he was popular on Instagram. He had a following. Granted, he had 1 million followers at that point, but he was active. People in England knew who he was. He was getting his name out there, getting his face out there. So working with Jubilee has been a blessing for me because not only the content very important and we address a lot of controversial topics, society issues and stuff, but it broadcasts to a lot of different people. It appeals to a lot of people. So I've been working with them since 2020. I did 5 episodes. And the last episode I did with them was the one that went the most viral. The last 2, I should say. The last 2 went viral. And I've been getting outreach from people all the way from India to the UK to the middle of nowhere in the United States. And it's because I realized it's only so much I can do until, nothing. I started realizing the more popular and the more I get my face out there, the easier and the more opportunities I get. And it's because of working with them so often and, them being a big channel and get my face to worldwide audiences. The hair, people like it. I'll be at work sometimes and like I just be in my own world and people be like, yo, man, I saw you that YouTube video. Wow, I'm surprised you're working. And man, you did such a good job, man. You inspired me, or whatever the case may be. And so it became one of those things where it's like, this is actually working. I'll be walking down the street in LA or New York and someone will recognize me from the videos, or one of my friends would tell me their friends was asking about me because they saw me in the video. So at this point, it's like, the more popular I get, the better I get. So that's why I take great pride in my brand. And now that I'm actually out there and I have my experience, now it's just a matter of just keep going, just keep getting my brand out there, and then everything becomes easier.
And then millions and millions will know you, and that moniker will be all over the marquees, featuring the most charismatic man, the most charismatic man in entertainment.
and some people don't understand it; they make fun of it. But like I said, when you have a brand and you know who you market into, it works every time. And I talk about this on my podcast all the time. Is whether it's always people in the entertainment industry, surprisingly, who don't understand the concept of branding. And I don't try to say that arrogantly. I try to tell people you have to know who you're marketing for. You have to know who you are as a person. Mm-hmm. I am not Superman. I am not, the guy who is going to see the girl across the restaurant and chase it throughout the whole movie. That's not who I am. That's not what I look like. And so I know who I am as a person. I know who I am as an actor. And I know what I can bring to the table. So I market and I play to that. And I mean, if you understand it, cool. If you don't, that's all right. But that's just how I perceive that. I've been in the industry for 10 years, 12 years. So, I kind of know what I'm doing at this point.
All right. So we have a portion of the show and it is called Shameless Self-Promotion. And of course, this is where you get to let everybody know, where they can find out about you.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Mr.NoDaysOffPercy. If Facebook, Percy Brown, IMDb, Percy Brown, and the podcast, The Prince of Fresh Air, is available on like 20 platforms. I forget all of them, but mostly Amazon, Audible, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts, I'm available. And, if you ever want to watch the Jubilee videos, just go to Jubilee on YouTube and you'll definitely find my face around a lot of reaction shots to it. My videos is up. So I'm, slowly but surely, my name is getting out there. So just type in the Prince of Fresh Air on YouTube, on Google, and you'll find me.
There you have it. He is the most charismatic man in entertainment. Percy Brown. The podcast is called The Prince of Fresh Air. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jim. You have been very great. I'm glad to be on your show, and I'm definitely looking forward to having you on my podcast.
I'll be right there, sir.
Be a rebel. Follow the show at Sherpolution on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Well, I guess you all know what that sound means. No, it doesn't mean that. Don't be disgusting. It's time for Sherpa Samples, and it is a portion of the show where I get to talk about some of the podcasts that I've been checking out. I just do a little sample of all the episodes that are out there, all sorts of shows. This week's selections are off the podcast charts, some new ones and exciting ones, a lot of different things. As I called it, a podcast potpourri, because it's a really good mix of what I got to check out. And I never really knew what I was doing going from one podcast to the next. So I got into some podcasts that have to do with imaginary worlds, and my chair is squeaking. I'm sorry if you hear that. And two of these that are very popular are Welcome to Night Vale and also Hello from the Magic Tavern. Hello from the Magic Tavern, it sounds like it's a lot of improvised stuff. It's about a guy who falls into an imaginary world behind a Burger King parking lot and all of the interesting characters that he may come across. Welcome to Night Vale is also a podcast about stories from an imaginary land, an unusual kind of humor in there, but I know this is a really popular podcast and people get into it, and maybe you might want to check out some of these just for a little break from reality, I guess. In the true crime podcast category, I listened to a podcast called Park Predators, and the story that I listened to was about the murder of a lady named Sarah Ellis in West Virginia. Really well told. Has a bit of a spooky element to it, but it is definitely an interesting true crime podcast. I also listened to Hidden Brain, and I know I'm going to mispronounce the host's name. I'm going to say Shankar Vadastan. And he talked in the episode that I listened to about rudeness. How rude. But it's really interesting when you can hear these podcasts that talk about the workings of the brain, and it's made simple to the average layperson to get to really learn this stuff because, we are complex people. And when you've got podcasts like this that break it down very simply for you, it definitely makes it a worthwhile listen. Two Bears, One Cave is a podcast with two comedians, Tom Segura and Bert Kreischer, who I think have both done separate podcasts, but they're good friends, and there's a lot of comical stuff in between them, and they talk about whatever. And I know that they are also very popular in Podcastia as well. In regards to comedy, there's Andrew Schultz's Flagrant with Akash Singh. And the episode that I listened to, he was commenting a lot about the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. So I know this was a while back, but I tape ahead of schedule, so what can I say? It is pretty brutal with the comedy. It's very sweary, so definitely not family friendly, and they're not trying to be. So if you like your humor on a little bit on the raunchy side, either Flagrant or Two Bears, One Cave, I'm sure you'll be quite happy with either one of them. The podcast Persona, The French Deception, is hosted by Evan Ratcliffe, and it is the story about a con man called Gilbert Chiquel. My French is terrible, as you can tell. Cheshire Please is a hip-hop podcast hosted by a lady known as Young Miami, as a rapper. I guess she's a rapper. This is a podcast that is definitely not catered to me. But if you're into hip hop, it's a very popular podcast. And in her debut episode, she interviewed Sean Diddy Combs, P. Diddy, Puff Daddy. I don't know what he's called this week. Diddy, Doody, I don't know. I have no idea. But if you like hip hop, just check the show out. It's just that simple. And also Smartless, which is hosted by three actors, Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett. You know all three of them, don't you? They are good friends, and they get to talk to a lot of different celebrities and a lot of different subjects that have to do with whatever. And the episode that I listened to, they interviewed Courtney Cox, and I got to know a lot about her. And you could tell that she's very comfortable talking with those three guys, and she must know them pretty well. And it was an interesting interview. They know how to handle themselves. Definitely an enjoyable show if you're into pop culture or other stuff like that. The interaction between the three of them is pretty unique. They definitely like to pick on each other, and they definitely have their fun. I also checked out the Dan Bongino show, and Dan Bongino is a former police officer and also a Secret Service agent who guarded former President Barack Obama. Spoiler alert, he's not a fan. And his show definitely has a political bend to it. A lot of him just speaking out on political issues. He has a conservative viewpoint, I guess, to fairly categorize it. You know, he may say a little bit more. I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, he's another guy kind of like Ben Shapiro. They're sort of along the same vein, but not exactly. Bongino isn't a media person. He's just a guy who wants to tell you like it is. So if you enjoy podcasts like that, check out his show. And of course, there were some shows that are high on the charts that I've been listening to for quite some time. And one of them is Behind the Bastards, and that's hosted by Robert Evans. Robert is an author who's written several books, and he has a new one out called After the Revolution. He talks about the worst people in history, simply put. And he has a lot of guest podcasters who were probably in his little podcast network, Cool Zone Media. Let's see, I give him a plug. You're welcome, Robert. You're welcome. And it's very entertaining. It's very informative. Not one for the kiddies. There's a little bit of a language situation there, but he definitely makes it worth your while because it's historical and it's also on other people. It may have a political viewpoint that you may or may not agree with. Just a fair warning. And also with the language too. But I've been actually a listener since the beginning. I enjoy it. So just use your judgment when listening to that one, folks. But I think you will enjoy it. He's definitely an interesting and charismatic podcaster, in my opinion anyway. And also, Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. Yes, the former late night talk show host has his own podcast, and he gets to talk to a lot of his previous guests for a longer period of time than he normally would have on his podcast. And he does it with his assistant from the TV show, Sona Movsesian, who has the best laugh in Podcastia, and Mr. Matt Gorley, who has produced a lot of different podcasts in Podcastia. Always a lot of laughs on the show. They have a lot of fun. It's one of my favorites to listen to every week. Even on Thursdays, he does Conan O'Brien Needs a Fan, where he gets to talk to unique listeners on his show as well. Definitely a fun listen. I like it. Finally, the last show that I checked out, which I think was probably my favorite of all the bunch, was the Bobby Bones Show. Now, I don't know if you know who Bobby Bones is. He was on a season of American Idol, for those of you in the U.S. watching that show. He's kind of like, I guess, well, the best way to describe him would probably be like the Ryan Seacrest of country music. The podcast itself is from his radio show. So it is radio friendly. It's family friendly. They definitely have a lot of fun on the show. They have some interesting guests. I was listening to an interview with singer-songwriter Keith Urban, and it was really cool to get to know him. And he's a good guest on whatever podcast he appears on. Very fascinating and very funny guy. So there you have it. A podcast potpourri. It's something for everybody there. And I'm sure there's something out of those 10 that you may just enjoy. And if there's a podcast that you would like me to talk about that I haven't mentioned yet, you know what to do. Just message me on social media or even email me at jimthepodcastsherpa@gmail.com, and I will check out an episode of whatever podcast you want me to listen to, and your name will be mentioned on the show. Yes, that's right. You will be heard by tens and tens of people. I don't know. What else will make your day better than that? Who knows? Who knows? But in the meantime, you know what? We step out of the potpourri and go into the outro-pourri. That makes no sense whatsoever, but cue the music. Thanks again for listening, everybody, and thanks to our guest this week, Percy Brown of the Prince of Fresh Air podcast. Keep an eye on him also on the big screen or the little screen. He's kind of hard to miss. He's a big guy with big hair, and he just might be a Marvel villain one of these days. Fingers crossed, Rebels, fingers crossed. If you're liking the show, please, please, please leave a nice review on Apple Podcasts or even Spotify. Help spread the word of the Sherpalution. And speaking of Sherpalution, you know what I'm going to say. Follow me on social media, Sherpalution, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And by the way, I've been on this new app, well, relatively new app, called Wisdom, and I get to speak, well, you can get to speak too, about podcasting. And I'm usually on there Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so I don't know where you are in this world. If it works out for you, take a look out for me on that app and hop in and say hello. And if you've got questions about the show itself, or if you have a podcast or there's a podcast you'd like to talk about, that's what we do. You know, even if you don't want to talk about podcasts or even come in my little chat room, there are so many inspirational speakers on this app. And if you're having a bad day, it's great to just listen to these other people too. Some of them are amazing and they've gotten to speak in my room too, and I've gotten to get to know them. Just a whole great group of people that I've gotten to know so far. Check it out. It's absolutely free, of course, as are most of my stuff. And if you're surfing the web, do they still say that? I don't know if they say that anymore. Check out my website, sherpalution.com, and you can check out any episode I have broken down by categories. You can hear my little side projects or even buy, yes, it's true, podcast merchandise. Yay! Well, somebody's got excited about that. I don't know. But I think that'll do it for me this week, folks. I will see you guys next week, and I believe we will be back with the Sherpa Screening Room, and it's going to be a good one, folks. That's all I got to say. Be sure to check it out, and until then, viva la Sherpalution.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Yo, come back now, you hear?